Yeah, so if I haven't heard from you yet saying that you're in a group, you're working alone. Um, and if you've sent me a note saying you're working in a group, I sent you a reply indicating what your group number was. Not that that really gets used for anything, but you got a group number.
I have a question.
Yeah,
Um, you didn't specify a file name for the script,
that's correct.
so mine is just called init.sh. That fine?
Sure, you can call it anything you want.
Yeah.
And again, you're going to be demoing this
So,
to the class, so as long as you know how to run it, you're good to go.
oh, okay. You won't run it at all then?
I might. So depending on what happens the demo, maybe I'll have an extra question like, wait, how did this work, and so on. I might go in and play around with the code myself. But by and large, it'll mostly be your demonstration of it that I base the grade on.
Oh, okay. Alright, cool.
Yeah. All right. Other questions? All right, so let's eyeball the ODPs, and see what that looks like. So let me hop over here. I'm getting used to my new setup here. So ODP 417 was the remove one, right, which was like remove, except you had to set a flag to indicate that you removed an X, and then don't remove any more X's. And so that is pretty much the same code as we had for remove, except there's this extra flag which I call done. And the basic setup is, done initializes to 0 as you march through your string up to and including the null terminator. If you've already removed an X, or if the character in question is not an X, go ahead and copy it. And so the first time you encounter an X, it'll get skipped, but if you're at an X right now, I just set the done flag to be 1, and now it'll copy all the characters forever after. And so testing your code, right? I want to emphasize this again, right? When you're testing your code, you want to try a lot of test cases, right? So we're trying to remove the first occurrence of an X. So we'd like to, certainly try something that includes an X, something that includes an X in the middle, something that includes consecutive X's next to each other, something that includes consecutive multiple X's that are not next to each other, something with X's in the beginning, something with multiple X's in the beginning, something with an X at the end, something with multiple X's at the end, something with a single X, something with 2 X's, something with 3 X's, and an empty string. That would be a minimum set of test cases I would want to run before I handed this code off and said, hey, this code is correct, right? Because depending on how you picture implementing the algorithm, right, all of these could have special circumstances in your code. And the other thing is, right, sometimes your function works great the first time you run it and not so great the second time. So I would not, write 20 versions of my main program. I would write one main program that calls, each of these in succession. So copy this into your input string, call remove one, printer output. Copy this, call remove one, printer output. Keep doing that, right? Or make a function, to make it easier. Make a test function that you pass a string, and it prints out the string, and then it calls remove one and prints out the modified string. And now in your output, you're going to see, hex space HE, hexo space HEO, hexxo space HEXO. And it's really fast to look at the output then and see if it's doing the right thing. And then in my main program, I would just say something like test, test hex, test HEXO, and so on. Right, good VI practice, right? It's the same code, you just keep changing what's in the quoted string, and you can use the CW command to do that. So yank your first line, do a 12p to make 12 copies of it, and then just come here, do CW, type in a new word, right? So you can write this main program pretty quickly and run it. And then, you know, if your code blows up in some case, you change your function, you want to test it again, you just recompile, rerun your main program, you're doing all those test cases. If this case is not working, I don't want to like change my code and just keep retesting this case. I want to make sure I go back and I didn't break something. So I'm going to go back and run all of these again. And if you do all of these in one main program, it helps to catch things like, you know, unterminated strings. Because if I start off with a string that happens to have a bunch of nulls in it, if I mess up how I terminate the string, it might still look like it did the right thing. But if I have a long string and then I have a really short string and then I have a super short string, right? If I'm not putting that null terminator in the right place, that's going to jump out at me. So do lots of testing, lots of debugging, and you know, try to get in this mindset where it's like, okay, I've written the code, I believe this code will work, right? And be convinced of that before you start running your test cases, because that's your exam model, right? That's your interview programming question model, is being able to get the code right the first time. And then run your test cases, and if that doesn't work, go back and edit. That's the sort of real world model of developing code and testing it and modifying it to make sure it works right. And then when that's all done, run your assess command. And you should ideally only run assess once. And you assess it and it's like, yep, you were right, you got everything perfect. Right? That's the handing the code to your boss or handing it off to another part of the team for them to use, and that's really not where you want to get a message back saying, hey, your code deleted all my files, right? So you can think about development like that.
Can we talk briefly about the SLP uploaded presentation?
Yeah, let's do that after 418.
Okay.
Cool. I'll write a note here. All right, so ODP 418, this was the move function. So you're moving the first character of a string to the end of the string, and your test case is there. You know, if it works for hello, it's going to work for probably most other strings that have a bunch of characters in them. So you could try a few of those, but then the edge cases are the empty string, a single character, and maybe two characters. So you'd want to try those also, and so there's some code that'll do this. So I chose to shift characters down, right? So I went from 0 to string length, and I copied output character I to be input character I plus 1. So this will shift down, you know, everything after the first character in the input, and will copy it into my output string, including the null terminator, which is probably not where I want it to be, right? So I did this anyway. I don't think that's necessary, actually. Oh, yeah, it is. All right, this is probably sloppier code than you would like, but this is one way to do it, right? Copy everything, including the null terminator, into your output, right? So I'm copying from the next position to the right into my position, and then at the end of that, I put on a null terminator, and then, assuming that I have at least one character, I copy the first character of my string, which I saved up here, into that last position, out bracket I minus 1. But I think the way we talked about this on Wednesday was probably a little more direct. All right, so let's talk about SLPs. Wow, my little on-screen displays are not on-screen displaying because I changed everything. I forgot. That's okay.
What do those do again?
So normally, when I switch topics, I type in, a couple of words that pop up over here in the upper left corner. So when you're watching the video and you see something up here which says SLP, you're at the beginning of the section where we talked about SLPs. But those are also loaded in that timestamp index on each video, and also the running one for the entire year. But I moved my office around, and so I moved my desktops around, and so now this is location 0, and my on-screen messages are popping up somewhere off screen. So I'll fix that somewhere.
I was asking, what is the SLP presentation?
Yeah, so let me pull that up. Go ahead and send me an attendance note if you haven't sent a ping already. Let me know you're here. And let me pull up Canvas. And usually the presentation is the last Tuesday of the term. I have to talk to Izad and see if he wants to do this together, or if our class is just going to do its own. But presentation should be last Tuesday. Which should be November 30th. Yeah, that's a Tuesday. So, my plan right now would be that it would be at 10 o'clock. And basically this class would present from 10 to 11, and the second class will present from 11 to 12. And I gotta touch base with Izad and see if he wants to do this together or not. But almost certainly it will be that Tuesday. And so the usual way that we do these presentations pre-pandemic is we open up the digital lounge and we push a bunch of tables in there. So this big area outside of the classroom, and students have posters of their work, which is your upload, and we announce this to the school, and people come in and they walk around and they look at your posters and they ask you questions, and if you have prototypes, code, hardware, things like that, you can display those, and it's basically like a dog and pony show. So it's usually a couple of hours, and people just come by and see what you're doing, and you talk about your work. So with COVID and things being remote, we've done two things. One option is we just take class time and we have each group present, in some order to the class, and basically tell us about your project, what you're working on, what you learned during the fall quarter, what your current status is, future plans, that kind of stuff. What we've did last year for the later quarters, and what I'm hoping we're going to do this fall, is do a virtual version of the big public expo. So we'll basically have a shared Zoom area, and people will go into breakout rooms, and we'll have a list of topics of what people are working on and what rooms they're in, and then people will come by, and if they want to hear about whatever it is you're working on, they'll hop into your breakout room, and the people in the room will be basically just doing presentations of their projects. And you'll just round robin, so you'll take turns, each person does their presentation, you just do that for an hour basically. And so the deliverable for this is your one-page poster. So you can download a template, and it looks like this. So cut the bottom off of this, right? Don't use that. But basically put in your project title, the date, the name of your team if you have a name, the name of the people working on this, and some things that you can put in there, right? Problem definition. So what is it that you're trying to do with your SLP? And some aspects of that would be, a statement of the problem, a discussion of the scope, right? How far is your solution going to go? What's included in your solution? What's outside the scope of what you're planning to do? Your schedule, right? So what do you expect to have done, at different points between now and June? You can talk about resources, what equipment do you need, how much money, what expertise are you going to have to get, and so on and so forth. So, you know, everything about the problem itself. Research and analysis are basically what you've been doing this quarter, right? So, if in order to do this thing that I want to do for my SLP, what does that entail? So you've been looking into it. You've learned more about, you know, the tools that are involved, or the hardware, or the software, how difficult or easy something's going to be, and so on. So that goes in here, right? And then propose solutions. So what are you going to do to achieve whatever the goal of your SLP is? So you could have, you know, initial block diagrams if it's a circuit, initial flow charts if it's some kind of software system, whatever makes sense here. And then potential applications, you can just sort of talk about, like, if this was a commercial product, or if you're planning to commercialize it, right, where would this be used outside of you know, satisfying the requirements for this course. So what's the application areas of this? And the idea of a poster is, you know, to fit all this information on one page. And, you know, typically at a trade show or a conference or something, in a poster session, there's, you know, boards set up all around a ballroom, and people take this one pager and they put it, you know, on the wall next to them, and people can just walk around and eat hors d'oeuvres and look at the posters, and if something catches their eye, they might come and talk to you about it. So this is sort of mimicking that kind of process. All right, does that give you a better idea?
Yeah, more work than I thought it'd be.
Well, it other than filling in the poster, it's really just showing up and talking. Tell people about what you've been doing, and, you know, answer some questions about it. And the only formal part of it is, you know, making this poster and uploading it. But yeah, you definitely need to know what you've been doing, and have a good handle on what the status of it is and what your plans are down the road, and so on and so forth. So the upload itself, right, that poster is 50 points, then the presentation is 25. All right, let me go through the chat because I've been missing all the chat messages. What's the purpose of making these functions return and int? No purpose, just if I make them return void, people get tripped up with void. So they return an int, but you can use any int that you want. Can you go over how to share our PA4 on GitLab with our group mates? Same way that you share them with me. So make yourself a different repository. Don't open up your CSE224 repo, but make yourself a new repo, right? PA4 Fall 2021, whatever you want to call it. And under the project settings, you can go to members, and you can add other people by their email or Git ID to be members who have access to that project. And you can set them up to have read and write access. There's 4 levels of membership. And you can give them full access to everything in the repo, and now you've got a shared code base that people can pull from. Now, if you start trying to do things with, you know, having multiple versions of this, then you're starting to get into dealing with branches and checking out branches and checking them in. That's a separate conversation, and that's where things get interesting with Git. But to a first level, right, if you have a common code base and you just say, I'm working on this function, you're working on that function, this person's working on this other function, right, you can you know, make some changes, pull down the current copy of the repository, push your changes in, and then somebody else, when they pull, they'll see your new version of the file you're working on, and that should keep everything consistent. And then when you want to submit, right, whoever's going to submit, make that submission directory under their CSE224 repo. Just copy all the files into their git add, git commit, git push, and then I can download it.
I will say that I was talking to some other students in the Discord chat. If you don't get added to the repo as like a maintainer, you can't straight to master unless
Mm-hmm.
you change some settings. So add them as a maintainer.
Yeah, so maintainer, I don't know if that's the highest one or if there's one above that. But reporter is read-only access. And maintainer, yeah, I think you're right, you should be able to push. Didn't you say we needed conditionals for edge cases? You might. There's a lot of ways to handle edge cases, but yeah, generally you need to you know, for example, if a string is empty and you're trying to move the first character to the end, you probably don't want to just do your usual for loop, right? So check for that first. Took me quite a while to remember. Sorry, go ahead.
I'll wait until you're done reading the chat question.
No, go ahead.
So you know how we in C we draw from other we can draw from other files like functions and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like we did for B and 3, I think it was. How do we do that for Bash?
So for Bash, you have a few options. If you want to actually pull in a function from another file, you can use the source command. So remember, when you say source file name, it basically opens up that file name and pulls the lines of code from that file and executes them inside your current script. And so if you had a script that did nothing but defined a set of functions and you said source that file name, that should create those functions for you in a way that you can now access them. Your other option, though, is instead of using functions, just put, you know, different behaviors inside different scripts. And then if you just type the name of the script, or maybe / the name of the script, that should execute it. But it executes as a separate bash process.
If you're intending to throw the command line right now, it's not sharp.
I'm not. I'm just talking. So source will open a file and execute the contents of that file inside your current script, and that's one way to get a function defined.
And do all the files, regardless of whether or not they're being pulled, like regardless of whether or not there's an executable, an executable file that's pulling functions from a file, do they all need to be set to the same mode?
So if you're going to source a file, I don't believe it has to be executable. But let's play with this a bit.
You also review how to make a bash file executable.
Change mode 755 file name. So let's do some of this. Let's make a function. That just prints out hello. Let me call it say hello. Alright, so I've got this fun. So if I try to run fun, it'll say permission denied. So to make it executable, change mode 755 fun. And then if I say fun, then I can say hello. 755 is generous permissions. It lets anybody read or execute it, and it lets me alone also write it. So owner is read, write, execute. Group and world are read, execute. All right. So if I wanted to use this function inside something else, let's just leave this function as is, and let me make a main program. So let's pull in the definition of this function, and then let's say hello. So now if I say main, it's executing my function, right? So what's happening when I say source fun, it's taking all of this stuff, right? And it's basically putting it right here in my script. So it's defining my function for me. And if I just do this, if I just say fun, right, then my main program does not know about the say hello function, because say hello got defined in this sub process that was started when I said, hey, execute the script named fun. So just saying fun creates a new shell and executes the contents of that file. If I say source fun, it says open up that file, pull the contents of it into this script, and execute it. So that's one way to do that.
And so basically, you can just put it like at the top of your main program or whatever.
Yeah, anywhere before you try to actually use the function. So I think if I do this, I think it will complain because it hasn't seen what the definition of that function is yet.
Yeah.
Alright, let's see. It took me a while to remember to assign null to the empty string. Yes, null terminators are a pain, and when we get to Java, we won't have to worry about them anymore. But we'll have to worry about them for the rest of this course and for 222. So then we have to set a script. Yes, so that's the change mod 755. Do we have to stay the whole time? I have a lab right after this class on Tuesday. Oh, so for the SLP presentation, this section would only be presenting from 10 to 11. And then the 11 o'clock class will be presenting from 11 to 12. So you would only have to stay during the regular class time. The one in June is scheduled at a different time, and that's usually 2 hours, and it's a big shindig, and so people usually go for the whole 2 hours, but we'll talk about that in spring. Is the SLP presentation just presenting an idea from the proposal, or is it a whole new document? The presentation is literally just, talking to people. It's potentially talking to an empty Zoom room, but, with other students in there. So you're just doing, like a 5-minute spiel on what your project is. And the only document is that one-page poster that gets uploaded, and that's a separate requirement. This is a multi-quarter project for the same project, right? Yes. So you're working on one project from now until June. And so each quarter at the end of the term presentation, you're sort of presenting the current status of the project. And the first quarter here in fall, the goal was really to figure out what you wanted to work on, what the aspects of that were, the scope, all that kind of stuff. And then in winter quarter, you'll probably be doing some initial prototyping if you haven't done that yet. And hopefully at the end of winter, come up with something that's, kind of like a proof of concept, something that you're going to build into your sort of final deliverable in spring. And so a lot of times people will come to the presentation in fall and they'll say, oh, that was a really cool project, and they'll come back in winter and see what additional progress you've made on it, and so on and so forth. What if the project's goals have turned out to be easier than we thought or more difficult? So you can definitely modify your goals. And that's sort of the goal of fall quarters, is pinning down exactly what you want your project to be, what the scope is, what the requirements are, the expectations, and so on. If you picked something and you're already mostly done with it, then you want to start expanding on it, right? Extend the scope of it. If you started off, with a plan to do this, and you found that just doing the very first step is going to take you half a year, then you want to scale back the goals. So yeah, definitely make adjustments like that. But try not to keep chasing moving goalposts, right? This is a easy thing to fall into in general. ideally, you have spent the past 8 weeks thinking about a particular set of goals, a set of milestones, and so on. And if you need to make adjustments, don't just push back the milestones because you're not done. Try to take what you've learned from the past several weeks of working on this and see if you can make a more accurate prediction of where your project will be over time and so on, so that hopefully whatever you end up with will be close to what you can realistically achieve. Okay, change mode, good. Can we talk about awk? Yes, we're definitely going to talk about awk. Nice bookshelf. Yeah, that's not my bookshelf. That's a bookstore in Princeton that just had some cool books. I've owned a number of these books, and I know of a number of those books, and I thought that was really cool. So, all right, let's talk about awk. I'm really curious where my little on-screen display is popping up. All right, so main thing we want to do with awk is take our calendar data and, I don't know, reorganize it, break it up, something like that. So for example, maybe your calendar file looks like this. And maybe you've set it up like this. So there's some internal appointment number, maybe there's a user, maybe there's a date, maybe there's a time, maybe there's a length, and a description. And maybe you're separating these by pipes. And you've got, information like that for a bunch of records. And, you might not do anything that looks like this, but this is one way I could imagine doing this, right? Having some sort of record ID that's unique for each record, and then, various fields of interest. So let's say you want to display all of the appointments that are coming up for a user. You might want to do something like an edit box, right? So dialog.
Users required?
Nope.
Okay, sweet.
Neither are times or lengths.
I was going to ask you,
Mm-hmm.
would this be something we would be graded against if we inform the users that instead of using spaces for your appointment names, can you use underscores or something like that?
Well, so this was another thing I wanted to talk about. So let's sidebar and talk about sed, and then we'll come back to awk. So sed is a stream editor, and we'll talk about it another day. But here's the main thing you need to know about sed for this. Sed space single quote substitute /old/new/g. This will read from standard in. Anywhere it finds this old pattern, it'll replace it with a new pattern. And it'll write the result to standard out. So why do we care about this? Let's sed substitute space /_g. This will read from standard in, replace spaces with underscores. This is a test becomes this is a test. So if you have a cal data file, and I say cat cal data, pipe that into sed, substitute space with an underscore, right? There's my calendar file, but with spaces replaced by underscores. So you could do that instead of asking the user to avoid spaces. And then, if I do this and I write this into cal data 2, now I've got my calendar file, but, set up right. And sed can do a lot of other stuff, but this is probably the sort of most common way that we're going to use it for PA4, just doing straight replacements of one character with another.
I was actually using it to delete things in a file, so find the line I need to get rid of, and then I just remove it with set.
Okay, yeah, you can do that too. Your other option is to use grep with a -v switch, which reverses the behavior of grep, and it dumps all the lines that don't match a pattern. So awk, so if you don't say -f something, the default field separator is a space. But if I've got pipes, right, I could use a field separator of a pipe, and I need to put a backslash in front of the pipe, because pipe means funny things to bash. It means pipe two commands together. So awk-f /pipe, and then you can say single quote curly bracket, and you can say something like, you know, print $2, and that'll print out the second field of whatever the input is. So again, we can take a file and send its contents into awk. And so if I wanted to print out, you know, a date and a description of the appointment, I could cat cal data, pipe it into awk, print date equals string 2, appointment equals string 3. But we got to do awk with a field separator of pipe, because my fields in my calendar file are separated by pipes. And so, you know, now I've got date equals this, appointment equals that. So let's see what happens if
Interesting that it got rid of the underscore. Oh, never mind, you didn't mention.
yeah, I used the one without the underscores. So if I do all of this inside back quotes, I've got, you know, this big long blob of information. I don't know why I called that date. Oh no, it's data. So if I do that and I put it in an info box, right, now I've got a little pop-up window that shows me my dates and appointments in a nice format. So when working on this stuff, right, my recommendation is don't get bogged down with bash, don't get bogged down with scripts, just play from the command line. Right, if you can execute from the command line, right, from, you know, the prompt right here in bash, a set of commands that do what you want to do, then all you've got to do is put those together into your script, right? And you can even use the history command to go back and recall, you know, what commands you were typing, and you know, just copy and paste these into a script then. So rapid development is always your friend, and if you can, you know, say, okay, I want to figure out how to take the contents of the calendar appointment and show it to the user, right? So you just play around with ways to get the data out of the calendar and put it in whatever format you want, right? Now another option is dialog edit box, cal data 00, and so now I've got an edit box, right, that's showing me the information in my calendar file, but I'm just looking at a raw file, right? So I'm seeing, you know, these things in front, I'm seeing pipes over here, and so on and so forth. That may not be what I want my user to see, right? So I might want to do some massaging on this and do something like this. Let's search for Nick in cal data, and let's change that pipe into a space. And so now my file looks like this, and I'm going to save that into, you know, some temp file, and then do a dialog edit box on temp. forgot my G. And if I want to figure out what the heck I'm doing, right, so maybe I want to get rid of that first field, so I'm going to pipe this into awk with a pipe separator. Issues here. All right. So maybe you know, I start with this file. This is my raw file, but you know, if I'm dealing with users and I just want to show Nick's appointments, right? I'm going to search for records containing Nick, and that'll pull out these records, and I'm going to print out just fields 2 and 3, so I'm going to dump the username because that's redundant. And then I'm going to put that into awk and print out, you know, the date and the appointment. And so when I do that, I've got, you know, a nicer file, so I can take this and put it into temp. And then I could do a dialog, edit box temp. And so there's, you know, a nicer display. So these are tools, and they're really powerful tools, and they're tools that won't cut your fingers off. So you can play with them at will, right? And just mess around with them, try different things, imagine what you'd like to do and see if there's a way to do it. Or just do different things with them and see if that, you know, sparks your imagination on like, oh, wait a minute, I could do this thing, you know. You know, get as comfortable with these things as you can. And this is a little bit, you know, suboptimal because if the person happens to start typing, you know, they can type in this window, and that's maybe not something you want to have happen. But it doesn't change your file, right? It simply outputs to standard out a new version of the file with whatever changes they made. So you can use an edit box to display information, and if they try to change it, it won't actually change it. So grep is good, awk is good, set is good. Using temporary files are good. And I think that's plenty for most of what you probably want to do for PA4.
I realize now, after doing the entirety of PA4, that I did almost all of it with like looping and arrays,
Mm-hmm.
and could have skipped a lot of that, but just using awk and set.
Okay. Well, not too late to make changes.
I mean, it all works, so. Yeah.
But if it works, that's good. It's extremely common to work on a project, get it finished, but before you finish it, realize like there's a different way that you could have done this. And I've got tons of code that, you know, is not the way that I would write it now if I were to write it from scratch. But you write it and it works, and you don't want to go back and mess with it, you know. But then the next time you do something similar, you know, you take what you learned and maybe you do it a different way. That's part of the fun and part of the process of being a programmer, right? It's a never-ending process of learning.
So I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
I've been working on a way to edit appointments in the calendar.
Okay.
Trying to come up with a way to dynamically create a menu of every single item in the appointments list.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a little confused as to how to do that because when I'm looking at the way that, looking at the syntax for the menu dialog option,
Mm-hmm.
it seems to have like a hard-coded number of tabs that you can click on or select. And I need something that will be dynamic. I want to have an option for every single item.
So one option for editing. So menus may be too high horsepower for what you need to do. One option for editing is you know, you ask the user what they want to do. They want to change an appointment. Ask them what the date is, right? And then maybe display a list of appointments on that date, you know, with a number next to each one, or do it in a checklist or a radio list and ask them to choose which appointment. And then just treat it as a delete, right? Go ahead and do whatever you would do if they wanted to delete that appointment. And then just go into the, you know, make a new appointment dialogue and ask them to choose. Yeah, that should be.
If you go on the Discord, I don't know if it's his real name or not, but someone named Callum came up with a way to dynamically create radio lists, for then you could, you know, select one, and then you could, you know, have the ID of that specific. Basically you want to create a long string using an awk or a while loop, and you then put that variable of the string into the dialogue command.
Yeah, perfect.
Oh, okay. Alright, thank you.
And you make sure that the string has, you know, whatever, like a radio list is 3 options, one being, you know, like off or on, and then like its description, and like, yeah.
And then a tag that gets sent.
Using string concatenation.
Yeah, and don't forget, you know how to write bash code, so you can do things like loops and conditionals, and you can, you know, you can concatenate strings x equals hello, right? This concatenates something to my string x. And so you can cobble this thing together by hand and then use that as that part of the radio list or checklist dialogue command that lists those triplets of appointment information.
Can you do plus equals with string concatenation? I know you can with like arrays and bash. You can do.
I'm not sure you can, but you could try it. But this definitely works well. All right, so someone in chat was asking about scope of knowledge related to SLP. So for example, if you're doing an SLP that uses vision processing, right, you probably don't want to try to develop your own vision processing package. There's things like OpenCV, which are fantastic toolkits for doing things like, you know, drawing boundaries around objects, detecting edges, things like that. Definitely you're welcome and encouraged to make use of these things, right? The SLP is much more like a sort of on the job project than, you know, PA3, for example. So you want to make good use of third-party software. You want to leverage stuff that's already available. But you don't want to get to the point where you're really just kind of like grabbing a few things and putting them together and not really applying a lot of your own creativity to the process. So it's a bit of a balancing act, but, you know, most people seem to find a good sweet spot. All right. Well, in addition to not knowing where my on-screen displays are, my little 50-minute timer has a glitch in it because we are now out of time. So I'll have stuff to do later today. All right, go ahead and send me an attendance ping on the way out. And keep working on PA5. Sorry, PA4. There's no more ODPs this week, so it's just PA4 at this point, and we'll start doing PA4 presentations on Monday. And have a great weekend if I don't see you in 2:15. I'll catch you next time.
Have a nice day.
Have a great weekend.
All right, you too.
There's nothing else that could be useful in PA4 that we need to know about, right?
I think you know about everything that could be useful. I mean, grep, sed, awk, all of the bash programming that you know how to do, and the dialog command, piping things using backquotes. That's a pretty rich tool set, and I think that's probably sufficient for most of what you need to do.